Good afternoon, welcome to another deltaDNA webinar. This afternoon we're going to be looking at the out-of-game campaign system and focusing in on some of the new features that were released last week in release 23. So what we'll do, we'll build out a campaign to show off some of these new features. As always, the campaign system is inside the Engage menu, and we have in-game campaigns and out-of-game campaigns. The in-game ones are for targeting the player whilst they're playing and delivering either data, game parameters back down to the game, or simple messages or image message based pop-ups. The out-of-game campaign system is used to send push notifications and emails to the players when they're not playing. So typically used to encourage players back to the game and often used with rewards or deep links to try and either gift them for coming back or send them to specific pages. But as always, when you're setting up a campaign, your starting point is going to be to have a think about who you want to target for the campaign. So in this case, we'll go into the Analyze segmentation tool and we'll build out a player segment. For this demo, let's focus in on people who have played the game and have spent money, but we've not seen them in the last 7 days. So the first thing we're going to look for is we're going to take a look at our metrics and find players with the most recent event timestamp greater than 7 days ago. And let's do that. So we're filtering down the metrics to find the ones we're interested in, and we're going to say days since the last event timestamp is greater than 7 days ago. And we'll add another condition onto that, and we'll find the players who have spent money. So I know there's a total real currency metric. I'll say that's got to be greater than 0, and it will come up and tell you how many players are in who match that condition. And if I hit the evaluate button, it'll tell me that I've got about 16,000 players qualify at the moment as having spent money but not been seen in the last 7 days. So let's just give this segment a name, lapsed pairs, and I'll save it down. And now we can actually go ahead into our campaign and start having a think about the content that we want to send the players. So we go into Engage, Out of Game, Actions. Our actions are just reusable pieces of content. You can use them across multiple campaigns, and we'll build out separate actions for iOS and Android push notifications. So say, call this one Come Back iOS, get back in the game, and we'll just save that down and do the same for the Android one. Slight differences in functionality between iOS and Android, and that's reflected in the two different action types. The point to note though, both the iOS and Android do let you add custom key value pairs to the payload, and if you're doing rewarding or deep linking, that's one mechanism of getting that data back down into the game. So there we go, there's our two actions created, sitting there, Come Back Android, Come Back iOS. We can now actually go ahead and start building the campaign around these, because that's just now got all the ingredients for our campaign. So I'm going to Out of Game Campaigns, and I'm going to create a new campaign. A lot of the interface here hasn't actually changed. A lot of it is still the same as it used to be, but there are some new features in here, some new bells and whistles that will let you do some rather more sophisticated things with your campaign logic. So to start off with, let's give this a nice friendly name. So lapsed pair campaign. Encourage pairs to return. So we want to now pick up the segment that we just created. So in the drop down here, let's find our lapsed pairs, and we can give this campaign a start date and an end date. This is a type of campaign that's probably best suited to just being started and then we'll leave it running for eternity. We just want this one to be automated and continuously updating and running. But you can add fixed start and end dates to a campaign, and that's particularly useful if you're trying to promote events or something happening this weekend or holidays, etc. You can also set the delivery time of your push notification. So at the moment this will try and deliver just in Universal Server Time, UTC. But if we want to deliver the message at a particular time of day, we can say, well, let's use the player's own time zone, and we'll go into the start date and set a time on it. So we're setting this just to start running today, but let's say it's going to be delivered at 5 o'clock. And by doing this and turning the player time zone button on, it means this will be delivered at 5 o'clock in your own local time zone, regardless where you are in the world. So it's not going to appear in the middle of the night and get missed or wake you up. The next two controls on this page are in fact new. The player progress reset, what this is all about, this is if a player is idle and essentially stuck in a campaign and not doing anything, this will let you reset them back to the beginning of the chain. So that's quite useful. If you've got a player and they've got into the campaign but they're not converting, it looks like they're stuck, they've not taken up your kind offer, you can use this to reset them. This becomes particularly important with one of the other new features that we have included. You can now have campaigns with multiple steps and take a player on a journey with different notifications or emails at different stages in that kind of sequence, and this can be quite good if you get a player who has gone through several steps but they're not converting, they've kind of got stuck, so you can now use this to reset them out and set them back to the beginning of a campaign chain. The rules of engagement, the priority feature, this is a new one as well. So you could do this with in-game messages, but with out-of-game, this is something new. And it's simply a number, and the higher the number, the lower in the priority. So number 1 will be top priority, number 100 would be far lower priority. So this can allow the campaign system to identify what priority a campaign is and prioritize them if you have multiple campaigns with similar or the same player segmentation conditions. The variant properties feature, this is used to do dynamic replacements. So if you've got an A/B test, you might want to send a certain parameter with a specific value to the people in group A and a different one to group B. So this is we can use a dynamic replacement on variant groups. I'll not go into the A/B testing feature just yet. I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes, because what we'll do, we'll actually build up a campaign kind of gradually increasing the level of sophistication in the campaign. So with the old system, your out-of-game campaigns were just a single hit, but now you can have multiple steps in a campaign, and this is where we set up all our actions and our steps down here. So you can see this has got one empty step sitting here waiting at the moment, and we want to add the actions into that. One of the new features we've got now, you used to just be able to add a single action onto a campaign. You can now add multiple actions in. So historically you would have actually needed to set up 2 different campaigns for iOS and Android, but we can now put both of their actions within the same campaign and do it all as one. So here's our comeback iOS message and our comeback Android one. And we could in fact save that down and set that campaign off and running just with that. That's enough to get you up and running. A very simple campaign that simply waits till the 8th day of a player. A pair hasn't been seen in 7 days, so on day 8 at 5 o'clock they're going to get their push notification message. And we could start that campaign right now and let it go. We can do some more with this though, because we can set a conversion event on this campaign, so we can understand and report on when the player has actually done what we've wanted, and we can, by putting a conversion event on it, it will chuck them out the campaign and make them available for other campaigns. So the conversion event in this case, because we're just trying to get the player to come back again, we're going to choose a game started event. So when we see a game started event, we know, yep, that's good, they're back. And you can add other criteria onto these. So if you're if you're trying to encourage them to buy something, you might put a transaction event in there, and then use some of these additional criteria to specify what product that you are trying to target them to buy. So that adds a little bit more sophistication. What we can also do, we can even add actions onto the conversion. So I've got an add action button down here. So what I might want to do, if the player has actually come back, I might want to then say, well, let's send them something else to reward them, or say thank you, or whatever. So let's what we got? Here's a special event email. So let's invite them to take part in our special event because they came back and they're obviously very valued players. So we can now save that down and take a look and see what that looks like. So our little summary page now is showing that here's our actions for iOS and Android. If the player converts by sending a game started event, we'll then take another action, a follow-on action, and send them an invite email to our special event. If they don't convert, the campaign simply ends. So how about we add a second step to that? And we simply do that by hitting the Add Step button, and then I can specify how many days to wait before marching on to the next step. So let's say let's wait 3 days, and we'll put our actions in for step 2, and the UI is just exactly the same as it was for step 1. So let's just filter down for the iOS ones. Just for simplicity, we'll just send them the same piece of content again, but in reality you probably want to try a different piece of content with maybe a slightly better offer, and we'll set up a conversion event there. Use the game started one again, but essentially each step can have its own set of actions and conversion event and follow-up actions. So we'll not bother putting a follow-up action on that one, and we'll just leave that there. And you can keep on adding more and more and more steps until you've got as many steps as you need. So now when we look at the summary screen, we can see here's our second step, and it's got its own conversion, etc. And we've got our 3-day pause before moving forward. The other thing that we can of course do is turn on A/B testing on our campaign. So let's go back to the campaign details page, enable A/B testing, and it's now giving me a whole new panel where I can control the number of variants in my test and the sizes of each. But let's just, if I save that down now, we can go across and we'll see that the test has now got variant A in here. Let's go back and start adding in a variant B. So if we add another group, we've now got an A and a B test, and it's changed the size of group A down to 50%, and I've got new columns in here to indicate which variant the content is going to be applied to. You don't necessarily need to put content on all the groups, so I've just saved that there so I can show you that although we have an A/B test and we've got two variants here, A and B, variant A is getting the content and variant B doesn't have any content assigned yet. And that's perfectly okay. You can run a campaign like that, or you can come back into your steps and add in additional actions that will be applied to the other variant. So let's say step 1 variant B, and in here let's put in an action for variant B step 2. Save this again, and if I go across to my campaign confirmation page, you can see now variant A and variant B. I could have added the conversion events on variant B and follow-up actions on those conversion events as well had I chosen to, but I haven't chosen to do that. So that kind of shows you that there's a lot of more powerful functionality and depth you can build into campaigns these days. So you can leave that saved and have somebody come back and check it over before finally deciding that you're ready to start it. So if I go back into the campaigns list, you can see it's sitting there. We can go back in and edit it, we can clone it, but it hasn't actually started yet. It's not got a view or a pause button. When you're ready to set the campaign off, you can come back in, go to the confirmation page and hit the start button. That's the content. That's the campaign off and running now, and you'll see you have a new panel on the campaign view page where you can actually now build a visualization and a report and have that saved away and publish it onto a custom dashboard. So you've actually got a bit of customization you can do here on your reporting, so you can set things up the way you like. Also, new features that something else we've added. Historically, it's always been possible to clone a campaign. So if you've got a campaign that's running really nicely and it's maybe got lots of steps and lots of content and it took you a while to set up, rather than having to start from scratch and setting up a new one, you can duplicate an existing campaign and start from there as your kind of starting point to build out a new one. That was always possible. You could do that before. One thing that's new though that we let you do that we didn't used to, you can now actually jump into a campaign that is running and start changing things about it. You will get a huge red warning panel at the top warning you that you can potentially do some unusual things if you start changing campaigns mid-flight. But if you want to change the content on something, if you've got a new updated piece of content or want to fine-tune some of the campaign configuration, then yep, that's absolutely fine. Just make your changes, resave it, and the confirmation page will give you a kind of an updated view of your new settings. So that's something that you can do now that you didn't used to be able to do. The final thing I'll probably mention about the campaign stuff is how you can actually interrogate a campaign to build your own reports, or even start building segmentation based on the results of one campaign to drive a follow-on campaign. So the thing I wanted to point out to you is if you go into your event manager, all these out-of-game campaigns are actually going to be triggering events automatically behind the scenes back into the system. So this out-of-game send event is the one you want to look out for. This should be in your event schema automatically, but if it isn't, just go into your development environment and come down to manage events and add it. And there's a template event sitting there that you can just click on and drop it into your game. This out-of-game send event will be triggered every time an out-of-game campaign targets a player and does something. And you'll see the parameters in here. It's going to tell us the campaign ID and the campaign name. So the campaign name, that was that nice friendly name you gave it. Campaign ID is a numerical identity we give each campaign. You can see it up in the URL bar. It'll be in the URL bar, but it's also mentioned on the campaign confirmation page. If you go into that, you'll see the campaign ID in there. Once a player is sent something, these communications parameters will populate out and tell you the sender, whether it was Apple or Android or SendGrid. You'll see the communication state, sent or failed. If it's a failed message, you'll see the reasons why, and those are typically the push. May not be a push notification registered for this player, or they may have reset the push notification token, or your certificate may be invalid. So whatever the reason, you'll see something in there that will indicate what the fail reason was if there's a fail. You'll also see what cohort they were in if it was an A/B test by ID and name, and you can see on the multi-step campaigns what steps they were on. And kind of important, because on a campaign you may have different pieces of content attached to different steps in the campaign or different variants. You'll actually get the action name that was applied to that. So you'll see the action name in the same way that you see the campaign name. So you can actually use this event to build quite detailed reports, either on individual campaigns or different aspects of an individual campaign, or even aggregate across multiple campaigns and say, well, show me the number of hits that each campaign, or the number of messages delivered and failed ratios for each campaign in the last 7 days. So you use this event, you can drill into a lot of detail as to what's going on within your campaigns. And really, to wrap up the webinar this afternoon, the final thing I draw your attention to is, as always, the help and support site. So if you get stuck with anything, just drop us a support ticket and we can take a look at any campaigns that you're trying to set up and help you out with them if you're getting stuck. There is documentation on the new campaign system. So if you go into the reference manual and down to engage and then into, clicking too quickly here, go into engage and scroll down to campaigns, and there's separate documentation for the in-game and out-of-game campaign systems. Okay, and the other one piece to mention, as well as the actual campaign system, there are some QA tools and a test tool that you can use as well. So inside setup, if you scroll down, you've got your engage trace tool here. This is for the in-game stuff, but you also have a kind of equivalent down here for out-of-game. So you have a messaging test tool, and you can use that if you know the push notification token for your device. You can use this to bypass any campaign rules and just send a message straight to your device. And this is really useful for checking that you've got your push notification certificate applied to deltaDNA platform correctly. So use the message test tool and the reports it will spit out to double check you've got all your messaging correctly configured. And the manage identity page is where you actually plug in your certificate, or an Android your ID, same as SendGrid your IDs. So that's it. Enjoy the new out-of-game campaign system. It's a lot more powerful than it used to be, and you can do some pretty sophisticated campaigns with it now. Thanks for watching.